The information in this video should not be relied upon as a formal valuation for any of these computers, and no responsibility is taken for how the viewer may use or misuse this information. Whilst every effort has been made to confirm the accuracy and validity of this data, there may be the occasional error or omission. This video may also contain my honest personal opinion. Prices quoted in this video are based on sold listings on ebay.com.au for a specified period, are in Australian dollars, and reflect the Australian retrocomputing market at the time of publishing. When I first started this channel, I wasn't quite sure what it would contain or how I'd make my videos. One of my early experiments was to follow the prices that vintage computers were selling for on eBay Australia, which turned out to be a surprise minor hit. Blame billbaud for that. He inspired me by making an excellent video about a year ago, where he listed his top 10 collectible retro computers from an Australian perspective. If you're a regular viewer, you may have gathered that the market videos have taken a backseat to other content as of late. For relatively simple videos, the market reports take a surprising amount of effort to put together. Despite the lack of videos, I've continued to maintain a record of vintage computer sale prices on ebay.com.au, and I now have just over 12 months worth of data. I'll continue collecting this data. What I'll do with it in future, I'm still not sure. Over the last year, one of the most common talking points among retro computing enthusiasts has been the apparent surge in vintage hardware prices. I believe I have enough data recorded over this period to identify any price trends that may exist. Whilst I've recorded data spanning dozens of machines, I've narrowed it down to 6, along with any close derivatives, that provide the clearest demonstration of any such trends. To try and normalise the data, I've taken 3-month averages for 2 periods, March through May 2020 and January through March 2021. At least 3 examples of each computer featured have changed hands via ebay.com.au during both of these periods. The difference between the March to May 2020 average and the January to March 2021 average should reveal price growth as a percentage. Please note that this is a purely academic exercise for entertainment and/or confirmation bias purposes only. Before I begin, Apple fans may wish to stop watching now. Between all the Mac derivatives that I've struggled to record, as well as a surprisingly small and inconsistent Apple II sample size during the periods used for this exercise, they're not the best examples for demonstrating any meaningful results in my opinion, and I'd rather not mislead anybody more than absolutely necessary. The Commodore 64 is arguably the easiest to understand vintage computer from an Australian market perspective. It was popular when new, and they're the most commonly traded vintage computer on ebay.com.au. On average, 15 Commodore 64s change hands every month. It's also one of a handful of computers where we can reliably separate working examples from broken ones. Starting with bread bins, the 3-month average price in May 2020 was $256.29 for working and $159.06 for non-working. In March 2021, the 3-month average price was $316.73 for working and $163.58 for non-working. This represents increases of around 24% and 3% respectively. The 3-month average price for 64Cs in May 2020 was $217.94 working and $123.10 non-working. In March 2021, the 3-month average price was $250.80 working and $133.22 non-working. This represents increases of around 15% and 8% respectively. When looking at bread bins and 64Cs together, it's interesting that the average prices of parts machines have remained relatively flat, and that working 64C averages have grown at a more modest pace than bread bins. My hypothesis is that the bread bin form factor stirs up more nostalgia than the 64C, hence the difference in price and price growth. Before leaving the Commodore 64, one tangent worth investigating is whether or not the 64C's reputation for reliability can be somehow quantified. From the 1st of March 2020 through until the 31st of March 2021, 35 out of a total of 89 bread bins and 27 out of a total of 105 64Cs were sold on a parts or repair only basis, inferring failure rates of around 39% and 26% respectively. In my opinion, the 64C is an excellent starting point for retro gaming on vintage hardware, offering better value for money and fewer potential headaches than a bread bin. The 3-month average price of the Amiga 500 in May 2020 was $368.66 for working examples and $218.76 for non-runners. In March 2021, average prices were $467.05 for working examples and $225.99 for non-runners. This represents increases of around 27% and 3% respectively, which is eerily close to the result shown for C64 bread bins. In terms of implied reliability, 11 out of the 75 Amiga 500s recorded were sold on a parts or repair basis, or around 15% of the sample size. That said, around a third of these machines were sold untested, and another third were listed as parts and repair due purely to floppy drive failure, which is a relatively easy fix. On this basis, the data suggests that the Amiga 500 continues to be a solid and reliable machine as it marches into its 4th decade. With the Atari ST range, I've chosen to analyse the recorded data across all variants and place them in one category. In other words, there's no differentiation between ST, STF, STFM or STE, nor is there a differentiation between 520 or 1040 models. On this basis, the average Atari ST price in May 2020 was $264.68. In March 2021, this had risen to $342.77, representing an increase of around 29%. It's worth noting that the more expensive examples tended to be either Mega ST variants, boxed examples with full documentation, or machines that have been converted into 4160 ST spec by way of a RAM increase to 4 megs. Looking at implied reliability, 4 out of the 35 STs recorded were sold on a parts or repair only basis, or just 11%. Of these, 3 were sold untested, and according to my notes, the remaining parts or repair ST was pretty badly trashed. When comparing Amiga 500s alongside Atari STs, it's worth noting that, despite these machines being considered as direct competitors in the Australian market back in the day, the ST continues to live up to its power without the price tagline, yet price growth as a percentage is broadly on par. As an added bonus, the ST appears to have held up even better from a reliability perspective than the Amiga, albeit slightly. In my opinion, the Atari ST is one of the few remaining vintage computing bargains, especially if you can pick one up anywhere other than eBay. The Sinclair ZX Spectrum wasn't also run on the Australian market, but it just so happens that the time frame and sample size of my recorded data lines up perfectly for this video, so here it is. The 3-month average price for the ZX Spectrum in May 2020 was $170.58. In March 2021, this had risen to $220, representing an increase of 29%. That said, several significantly less expensive examples changed hands during the past year, the least expensive of which being a faulty 48K rubber key specky that sold very quickly for $50 buy it now in November 2020. I love the specky, but $220 for a machine that, in original condition, will require up to $100 worth of parts to get up and running again?
He's dreaming.
I'm hopeful, but not optimistic, that this rise is an anomaly based on a small sample size taken at a particular moment in time. Meanwhile, if you happen to find a broken or untested specky for $50 or less, grab it without hesitation. They make a great first restoration project for someone looking to take the step from retro gamer to hardcore vintage computer enthusiast. The Dick Smith VZ machines, being the VZ200 and VZ300, were averaging $188.25 in May 2020. In March 2021, they were averaging $288.50, representing a 53% increase. Interestingly, many VZ owners appear to have kept all the original packaging and documentation, with extras such as cassette recorders and RAM packs bundled with many of the VZ200s and VZ300s on the market today. As such, I'd avoid ratty examples unless they're really cheap, especially given how many VZs there are in great shape for their age. The final series of machines to feature in this video come from Australia's own Microbee. Trying to nail down price trends on Microbees is something of a challenge, as there were so many models released over the company's relatively short lifespan, and bundled accessories such as floppy drives and monitors can vary almost as wildly as final sale prices. However, I have recorded just enough data to gain at least a little insight as to price movements. In May 2020, Microbee prices averaged $361.95. In March 2021, prices averaged $620.47, representing an increase of 71%. Bear in mind that this video is only as good as the data recorded and how I've chosen to interpret it. This is absolutely not gospel, At best, it's just confirmation bias, so please treat it as such. Whilst there are individual outliers within the sample data, such as mispriced buy-it-now bargains and museum-grade examples commanding record-high prices, the recorded data appears to confirm the belief that vintage computer hardware has increased in price over the last year. I'd be keen to get your thoughts on all this. Let me know in the comments feed. Until next time, see you later.